The air in the hall was heavy with protocol, thick with the smell of floor wax and old wood. I was watching my father's face when the officiant's voice finally cut through the silence. "It is my profound honor to present the new director of Joint Cyber Operations." I saw the exact second his smug smile cracked, freezing into a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. He jolted, a clumsy, awkward attempt to snap to attention, his suit bunching at his shoulders as the officiant continued. "Major General Anna Jensen." That was it. That was the moment. The moment the two halves of my life finally, violently collided. The moment my father's world, the one he'd built so carefully, shattered at his feet. To understand the silence that filled that hall. A silence so total it felt like a physical weight. You have to understand what my father said just 30 seconds earlier. To understand the reckoning that followed, you have to understand the two lives I was living. One life they knew, and one life they, quite literally, could not be allowed to comprehend. So, let's go back. 30 seconds earlier. I was standing near the front of that same grand hall, my back straight, trying to breathe. I was in my full Class A uniform, the decorations on my chest feeling impossibly heavy, each one a story I could never tell. That's when they arrived. My father, and Robert Jensensen, a retired colonel obsessed with his own legacy and my brother's real-world success. And with him, my brother, the Mark Jensen, the family's golden child, a corporate lawyer who always described my military career as a cute charity project. They were ushered to the front row right past me, their expensive suits looking loud in a room full of dress uniforms. My father saw me, his eyes scanning my uniform with a familiar mix of confusion and pity. He leaned over to Mark, his voice a stage whisper designed to be heard. "Well, at least she dressed up this time," he chuckled. "She looks like she's playing soldier." Mark let out that snide little snicker. The sound of it echoed in the formal quiet. I felt the heat of it on the back of my neck. I heard it. And I knew the high-ranking officers in the row behind them heard it too. I could feel their collective posture stiffen. I didn't turn. I didn't move a muscle. I just kept my eyes fixed on the empty stage, my body rigid. He thought my uniform was a costume. He thought I was playing soldier. The same condescending pat on the head I'd gotten since I was a kid, the same one he gave me when I won the state science fair while Mark won a plastic soccer trophy. It was just me, Computer Annie, in her dress-up clothes. He had no idea he'd just belittled me in front of the one man who had to read my classified mission reports. He had no idea this costume, this life he found so confusing and irrelevant, was the only reason his precious son's financial firm and his own bank account were still safe. To understand my father's words, you have to understand the world he lived in, and the one I lived in. They were universes apart. His was a world I could visit, but mine was one he couldn't even imagine. I think back to a family barbecue, maybe a year prior. It was loud, the air thick with smoke and my brother's voice. Mark was holding court by the grill, a beer in his hand, regaling my father with his latest corporate battle. "It was a hostile takeover, Dad," Mark bragged. "I mean, I had to be a real shark." My father, Robert, was beaming, his face lit with a pride I hadn't seen directed at me since, well, ever. He clapped Mark on the back. "That's my son. A real killer. Built an empire." I was home on a rare leave, feeling like a stranger in my own backyard. I tried to connect, to find some common ground. "I actually just finished a big project too," I said, my voice feeling small. "I led a joint task force." My father cut me off, not unkindly, but with that deep, bone-tiring dismissiveness that had become the soundtrack of my life. "That's nice, dear," he said, turning back to Mark. "Speaking of tasks, can you grab me another beer?" He chuckled. And this is the part that always stung. The justification. "You know, all this computer stuff you do just confuses me. Mark's job is so much more straightforward, it's tangible." Straightforward. That was the word. My brother's spreadsheets were tangible. My work was just computer stuff. It was the same look I got in high school when my astrophysics project was passed over for Mark's model car. For years, I had tried to speak their language, to translate my life into terms they could understand. But I finally realized They just didn't want to learn. To them, I was just Computer Annie, a data entry clerk for the government. They thought my secret clearance was a cute, bureaucratic quirk. Something that just meant I wasn't allowed to complain about the bad office coffee. My other life was different. It wasn't a sunny backyard. It was a skiff. A sensitive compartmented information facility. A windowless, sterile room, always cold, the only light coming from a wall of glowing screens showing global network traffic. In that world, I wasn't Annie. I was Oracle. I was at the head of a long, dark table, surrounded by operators from every branch, all of them looking at me. In this room, my voice was the only one that mattered. On the main screen, a video line patched through. It was Pont General Peterson, by command my commanding officer, a grizzled but fair 4-star who respected results and nothing else. His face was grim. Oracle, he said, his voice pure gravel. Operation Black Fog is live. Adversary is active in the grid. What's the call? There was no hesitation. No, I think. Just the data. Intel confirms a level 5 exploit, I said, my voice calm, cutting through the tension in the room. They're targeting the eastern seaboard's financial infrastructure. I took a breath and gave the order. I'm authorizing the Alpha Protocol override. We go dark, we hunt, and we burn them out. This is not a drill. Execute. The room didn't erupt in noise. It erupted in silent, precise action, a dozen operators moving with lethal focus. Peterson just stared at me through the camera, gave one sharp nod, a nod of absolute trust. Godspeed, Oracle. In one world I was Computer Annie, not even trusted to hold a real conversation. In this one, I gave the orders that stopped digital wars before they started. My father was proud of his shark. I was hunting krakens. That incident in the hall. That was just the punctuation. The real shift, the tipping point, had happened a week earlier in the cold, sterile silence of my secure office. This wasn't going to be about revenge. I was too tired for that. It was about correction, a procedural adjustment. The notification flashed on my terminal, the subject line stark and for a moment, unreal. Promotion to Major General 08. Appointment as der Jiko. I just stared at it. The reckoning wasn't a fight I had to start. It was a ceremony I just had to schedule. The only strategy was ensuring they were there to see it. General Peterson called me personally. Anna, he said, his voice gravelly but warm. Public or private ceremony. You've more than earned the right to stay in the shadows if you want. The shadows were my home, my comfort. But I thought of my father's pitying looks, my brother's sneers. Public, sir, I said, my voice perfectly steady. Full honors. And I'd like to request a specific officiant if I may. My plan wasn't emotional. It was methodical. I would use the very system they claimed to respect. I had formal embossed invitations sent, not an email, not a text. An official summons to the Pentagon Hall of Heroes. I knew them. They wouldn't come for me. They would come for the venue, for the prestige, for the chance to rub shoulders with men they considered real leaders. And the officiant I requested? Judge Michael Thassarin, a sitting federal judge on the FISA court. A man whose name was a quiet legend in the intelligence community, and an absolute boogeyman to corporate lawyers like my brother. The bait, of course, was taken. Mark called me the day the invitation arrived. Hey, Computer Annie, he started, and I could hear the sneer through the phone. Got your invite. A bit stuffy, isn't it? Dad and I will come see your little Attagirl award. He actually chuckled. Anyway, is that an the Nunja Judge Michael, the FISA guy? Hell, I'm in. I might want to introduce myself to him, make a connection. I listened, holding the phone, my hand perfectly steady. He had no idea. He thought he was walking into his world, a schmooze fest. He was walking straight into my 9 by me invitation. To be judged by the one man he truly professionally feared. I hung up, turned to my terminal, and calmly highlighted their names on the official guest list. Then I clicked, confirm. The hall was packed. It was a sea of dark blue and green, uniforms covered in ribbons and medals that told stories of entire careers, of decades of service. The air itself felt heavy, thick with protocol and the quiet, nervous energy that comes before a major ceremony. And in the front row, like two smudges of charcoal on a pristine canvas, sat my father and my brother. Their expensive suits, which always looked so powerful in a boardroom, just looked cheap. They were visibly out of place and they knew it, but they covered it with whispers and smug sideways smirks. I took my place, standing off to the side of the stage, my back straight, my gaze fixed on the flag. I felt their eyes on me as I walked. And then, I heard it. My father's voice, that familiar stage whisper, carrying in the quiet. Well, at least she dressed up this time. She looks like she's playing soldier. Mark let out that snide little snicker. A cold, familiar numbness washed over me, the same feeling I'd had 1,000 times before. I didn't flinch. I didn't even breathe. But on the stage, General Peterson, who was seated among the other dignitaries, heard it. His head turned, just slightly. His eyes, which had seen combat in 3 decades, found my father in the crowd. His face, normally so expressive and warm, turned to absolute granite. He stood up, walked to the podium and adjusted the mic. The room, which had been rustling, went utterly silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed, sharp and clear as a rifle shot. "Before we begin, a note on protocol." He paused, his gaze sweeping the front row and then landing, with surgical precision, right on Robert and Mark. "In this hall, we recognize rank, we honor service, and we respect the uniform." He let the words hang in the air, a public reprimand so severe it was a physical blow. "There are guests here today who may be unfamiliar with our traditions. I suggest they learn, and learn in quickly." My father shifted in his seat, his face a mask of pure, confused annoyance. Mark just looked bewildered, like a kid who'd been yelled at but didn't know why. Peterson's face remained like stone. "It is now my honor to introduce the officiant for today's oath of office, the Honorable Judge Michael." I kept my eyes forward, but I saw it all. I saw the blood drain from Mark's face. He went pale, his eyes wide. He sat bolt upright, his networking bravado vanishing in an instant. This wasn't just Judge. This was Judge. The man who signed the warrants. The man who could end his entire career with a single investigation. Judge Michael stepped up, his black robes making him seem even more imposing. "Thank you, General." His voice was quiet, but it commanded the entire hall. "We are here today for an officer whose career has been, by necessity, a closed book. Her work cannot be discussed. Her callsign Oracle is known to our adversaries as a ghost, and to our allies as a fortress." My father was frowning, still not getting it. But Mark looked like he was going to be sick. The judge looked directly at me, a small, rare smile on his face. "Her operations have saved this nation's critical infrastructure on at least 3 occasions I am personally aware of. The promotion to Major General," he said, and then paused, "is, frankly, a formality. The real honor is appointing her as the new Director of Joint Cyber Operations." He turned back to the audience. "It is my profound honor to present Major General Anna Jensen." The room exploded. But I wasn't watching the room. I was watching my father. His mouth was open. His eyes were wide, finally pointing me. He looked at the new 2-star rank on my shoulders, at the rows of medals he'd dismissed, and his body betrayed him. His training as a retired colonel took over. He jolted to his feet, a sloppy, shocked, involuntary snap to attention. A subordinate recognizing a superior. Beside him, Mark was frozen, his face a mask of pure, horrified comprehension. The entire hall was standing, a deafening wave of applause washing over me. Everyone, except my father and my brother, they were standing too, but they were trapped. They weren't clapping. They were just exposed. My father had spent my entire life teaching me the importance of rank. In the end, it only took 6 words for him to finally learn who outranked who. The applause, when it finally faded, left a different kind of silence. Not the shocked, frozen quiet from before, but a warm, respectful hush. The reception began, and almost immediately, I was surrounded. Not by family, but by my peers. Senators, high-ranking officials I only knew from secure video calls, and the judge. They didn't pat my head. They didn't look confused. They shook my hand, their eyes level with mine, their congratulations firm, real. They spoke of my analysis, of my team's work, of the future of the command. They spoke to me, Major General Jensen. General Peterson made his way through the crowd, a glass in his hand. He raised it, his voice just loud enough for our circle to hear, that familiar gravel now filled with warmth. "To Oracle," he said, and my breath caught. It was the first time my call sign had ever been used in a public setting. May she always be 2 steps ahead. Everyone raised their glass. And I realized, this was it. This was what I had been searching for. Not their approval, but this quiet, earned respect. This was my true family, forged in secure rooms and high-stakes operations, not in dysfunctional obligation. I glanced across the room. Just once. My father and brother were still standing by their seats, rooted in place. They were in a cold, empty circle of their own making. No one approached them. No one spoke to them. In this world, their suits and their boardroom bluster meant nothing. They were irrelevant. They looked small. After a few more agonizing moments of being ignored, they just left. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't make a scene. They just slipped out the side door, 2 shadows receding. I felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt a final click, like a heavy door locking into place. The case was closed. 6 months later, my world looked completely different. The Hall of Heroes was a memory. My new home was a state-of-the-art operations center, a place that made the old skiff look like a closet. The glass door to my office was etched with my name and rank. Dear Jaco M.G. Jensen. It wasn't a costume anymore. It was a statement of fact, a responsibility I carried every single day. This was my element. I was at the head of a massive briefing table, leading an interagency task force. The faces looking back at me were the sharpest in the nation, and their focus was absolute. They looked to me for the final decision. This was the family I had built. One founded on mutual competence and a shared critical mission. In this room, my voice was never confusing computer stuff. My analysis wasn't a hobby. It was the baseline. It was the authority. I used to shrink myself, trying to translate my life's work into bite-sized pieces a layman could understand at a barbecue, trying to make myself smaller so I wouldn't make them uncomfortable. Here, I could finally be my full self. Here, Oracle wasn't just a call sign. It was my job. That afternoon, back in my office, a notification popped up on my personal device. A quiet ping in a day full of urgent ones. It was an email. My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. I simply looked. The sender, Robert Jensen. The subject line, just one word. Anna. I opened it. A flicker of curiosity, maybe. Not dread. Not hope. Just curiosity. Anna, it read. I didn't know what you do, who you are. I am proud. I know I don't. Can we talk? Dad. I read the words over, letting them sink in. Proud. I didn't know. A year ago, 5 years ago, my entire life, those words would have been a rainstorm in a desert. I would have wept. I would have crumbled with relief. I would have given anything to hear them, to finally have that gaping hole of his approval filled. I looked at the words on the screen, and I thought of all the years I'd waited for them. The guitar lessons I never got because Mark's football fees were an investment. The busted laptop I'd had to replace myself, while Mark got a new car for making the dean's list. All of it had been a test I was never meant to pass. But looking at the email, I just felt quiet. The validation I had needed so desperately. I'd already gotten it. I'd earned it myself. I'd received it in a hall full of uniforms, and I received it every day in a room full of the brightest minds in the country. The power his words held over me was gone. My peace was no longer dependent on his apology. My father's validation was no longer a currency I accepted. My face was calm. There was no anger. There was no triumph. There was just peace. I didn't delete the message, and I didn't reply. I just moved my cursor, clicked the archive button, and the message vanished. I turned back to the operations map on my wall screen. My focus returned instantly. The work was waiting. My father spent his life chasing his legacy through my brother. He never realized the entire time he was standing in the shadow of mine. If you've ever had your expertise dismissed by people who were supposed to support you, share your story of quiet competence below. In this community, we see your rank.